Yeah. I was just waiting. It's a little early. Oh, it's Washington and Adams. Good morning, everyone. So I was going to say Happy New Year. It's October, but I know some people are on calendar years. I was just told a few minutes ago. But for those of us who are on the fiscal year calendar, it's the first meeting of the year, so there's a lot of hope, a lot of excitement. FY18 is now underway, so hopefully you're all as excited as we are. So a couple of administrative announcements before we get started into our program. The first thing is, for those of you who are remote, you're viewing via the YouTube channel, you can chat via YouTube, and you can also send us email via RM Communications. For those of you in the room, do we have microphones on? Okay, good. So for those of you in the room, we have microphones. Please, if you have a question, please wait for the microphone and tell us who you are and the agency that you are from. So this morning, for those of you who are in the room, hopefully you were able to join us for our coffee and networking. We do that every BRIDG meeting from 9 to 10. Today it was up in Washington. It's usually up in the presidential rooms. This afternoon, for those of you who are in appraisal teams or have agencies that are in appraisal teams 2, 3, and 4, we will be doing our regular meet and greet. So you can meet your appraiser, you can meet record center staff, other NARA staff who are here. We'll do those at 1 o'clock, and it will be up in the Adams and Washington rooms this afternoon. So please stick around, go out and have lunch, and then come back. 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock is when we do our meet and greet sessions. Okay, so again, as always, we encourage you to send comments, feedback to RM Communications. We're always looking to improve what we're doing with our BRIDG meetings. In that vein, I also wanted to let you know that back in September, we sent out a survey to everyone via the RM Communications list. We'd like to get your feedback on what you want to hear in terms of substance, but then also the style and the format of the meeting. We're always looking to make improvements. We are going to keep this survey open for at least another 30 days, and our goal is to really come back in December and give you a debrief on what we found via the survey, what are some of the areas where we can make some improvements so that we can make the BRIDG meeting a better experience for you, not only for those of you who come in person, but for those of you who are joining us online. A couple of other announcements. We have sent out a notice that we will be doing our next meeting of senior agency officials for records management on November 6th. We're very happy to have Ms. Naomi Rao, who is the newly appointed administrator of the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs. She will be joining us. And we are working up some content that I believe will be interest not only to those of you in the room, but also to your senior agency officials that you work for. A couple other announcements. On November 2nd, we will be co-hosting a industry day at 18&F over at GSA with the Schedule 36 folks. So we're going to be talking about new special item numbers that we have for records management. Hopefully you've been following Records Express and our blog, so you've seen the ERM requirements that we've posted and some of the work that we have done with GSA to sort of get to shared services and provide better solutions around records management for agencies. So we'll be doing a full day there. The morning session starting at 10 o'clock will be for agencies, and then there'll be an afternoon session that will be targeted towards vendors. So please mark that one on your calendar. And then finally, just a quick heads up, we'll talk about this more in December when we meet again. The annual reporting period for 2017 will run basically the same window that we had this past year from January to March. We'll have a AC memo that will be coming out very soon, and we'll talk about it in much more detail in December when we have our next BRIDG meeting. So let me go back before we get into the main part, just to give you a quick overview of the agenda. We have a full schedule, so we're going to try and stay on track. We're going to talk about the strategic plan after the archivist's remarks. We have Jeff Lunsford who's here. It's going to talk about new rates for the FRCP services for FY18. Amy Bennett is here somewhere with Alina Simo, hopefully. I actually believe she's coming in a little bit late. They will be here to talk about some of the work that we've been doing with them and OGIS and making that connection between FOIA and records management. We'll have a quick brief on CUI services through the FRCP. Arthur Hawkins will talk about the web page and the refresh, and then we'll close with Gary Ralphus talking about some of the more recent updates related to the records management training program. So with that, I will turn it over to our first piece of business and invite the archivist up here for some opening remarks.
Thanks, Lawrence. Let me start by thanking you for the work that you do every day to ensure that the records of this government are created and maintained in such a way that 200 years from now, people are going to be able to hold the government accountable and to learn from our past, which is the mission of the National Archives. You guys play an important role in us being able to fulfill that mission. So on behalf of future generations, I want to thank you for the work that you do. It's not the kind of work that you probably every day get thanks, but you need to know that it's an important part of preserving American history. So be proud of the work that you do, because I am very proud of it. So the core mission of the National Archives remains unchanged from the day that we were created as a federal agency in 1934, making the records of the U.S. government available to the public. We're passionate about this mission because these records are the cornerstone of our democracy. These records give citizens the information they need to learn from the past, to ensure their rights, to hold the government accountable, and to participate in the civic process. Times have changed, and we are changing with them. The growth of digital records requires that our traditional archival techniques of managing, preserving, providing access to, and interacting with federal records and artifacts be adapted to new types of records, users, and technologies. I want to take this opportunity to talk about our new agency strategic plan, and for all of you, how this plan expands on the vision of managing government records, the Managing Government Records Directive to modernize and transition to digital government. This plan communicates our agency's priorities and directions to our staff, OMB, and Congress, and you. It provides direction for long-term planning around budget requests, IT investments, and workforce planning. And it allows us to engage our staff and your agencies to benefit from your ideas and expertise. It defines the agency mission, vision, and long-term objectives for NARA through 2022. More specifically, it renews NARA's commitment to 4 strategic goals: make access happen, connect with customers, maximize our value to our customers, and build our future through our people. Our draft strategic plan was posted on our website, and we shared it with your agencies and other stakeholders. Our draft was revised based on the input we received and then submitted to OMB. So I thank those of you who participated in contributing input so far, and we continue to take your input into consideration as we implement this plan. Through this strategic plan, I lay out a forward-thinking vision that will move the National Archives and your agencies down the path toward realizing a digital government. This vision acknowledges that born digital and digitized records are how the public and researchers for generations to come expect to use our nation's records. The digitization of records not born digital is a key component of making this happen, and the draft plan requires federal agencies to the fullest extent possible to digitize hard copy and analog records that are permanently valuable before transfer to the National Archives if those records are not in NARA's physical custody after December 31st, 2022. All paper or analog records transferred by agencies to NARA federal record centers before that date may remain in that format until their appropriate disposition in accordance with the applicable record schedules. While NARA will still be in the paper and analog business for decades to come, and likewise so will you, this change in direction recognizes how your agencies are creating records now and allows us both to focus our resources in the ever-expanding digital space. This will not be easy, and there are lots of hard questions, and we're committed to working through them with leaders such as you. I'm also committed to discussing our plans directly with OMB. And next week, I will be meeting with the new director of OIRA, Naomi Rayo, and I intend to discuss issues such as resources and tools required by NARA and your federal agencies to make the vision of this strategic plan a reality. Each of you are critical advocates and champions for all things related to records management. Your leadership is critical to ensuring the federal records in your agency are properly managed, and we're counting on you to engage with your colleagues that are responsible for issues such as declassification, FOIA, and information technology in your agencies. My staff and I stand here ready to help you as your agencies meet all their records management responsibilities. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you, David. So now we're going to get into our panel where we're going to talk about the strategic plan, and I'd just like to introduce our distinguished guests this morning. So all the way on your left, we have Jay Basenko, who's the Chief Operating Officer for the National Archives. Next to him, we have Jay Traynor, who's the Executive for Agency Services, and then seated next to him is Micah Cheatham, Chief of Management and Administration. So with that less than seamless transition, we're going to go over, we just have a couple of slides. So the intent of this panel is really more for you. We want to have as much discussion and Q&A as we can. We want to make sure that you are clear on our intent, what we have put forward in our draft strategic plan, and we'd like to hear your questions, concerns, and any areas that we may need to clarify for you. So the slide that you have up shows the 4 strategic goals, which are the same as was in the previous strategic plan. We like these 4 goals. We're still committed to these 4 goals. And what we want to focus on are goals 2 and goals 3. So in goal 2, we, in our most recent revision for the strategic plan, added goal 2.4, recognizing that we are committed to providing guidance for you to ensure the success of the strategic plan, particularly in areas that we'll talk about in a minute in goal 3. We understand that we need to issue policies, we need to work on our own internal processes and work with you on your processes so that we can all be successful in that transition to a digital government. This is what we know we need to do, and this is something that we are going to be working on with you and getting feedback from you on the kinds of things that you need so that you can be successful. We do want to talk about Goal 3, and you can see the goals that are up here. Hopefully you've seen them in the draft strategic plan. We revised them a bit. But the two goals focus primarily on doing inspections of federal agencies in 3.1 and meeting a target of 10% of federal agencies by 2019. And then the big goal below that, which is by FY 2020, no, it's 2022, NAR will no longer accept transfers of permanent and temporary records in analog formats. So to the fullest extent possible is the important part that we added in the most recent version of the plan. And these are those three goals, 2.4 and these two that are on the screen, are really the ones that we see as the ones that are probably having the greatest impact on all of you as federal agencies and where we want to have some discussion. Before we open it up in the Q&A, I don't know if I want to, maybe I'll turn it over to the panel to see if anybody has any comments about the three goals, specific points that we may want to emphasize that I didn't.
So before we get into that, Lawrence, just for background, I want to share a few things.
Yes, please.
So our draft strategic plan is something really no different from what each of your agencies has recently had to go through as well. We developed it with input from our staff. We had all hands, town halls, a survey, and then we also pushed it out to departments and agencies and other external stakeholders and professional organizations so that we could obtain feedback and not just develop this ourselves. And I think that's critical because we want to, one, thank you for the input that we received. We understand the suspense was short, but that feedback resulted in real changes. So two that I want to highlight for this audience. The new goal that the archivist and Lawrence mentioned, that by 2020, NAR will have policies and processes in place to support federal agencies in their transition to fully electronic record keeping. This was something that department and agency personnel identified, as well as our own staff, so we worked that in. And the second thing is this phrase that both Lawrence and the archivist used when speaking about the 2022 goal, which is to acknowledge with the phrase to the fullest extent possible, that there will be some exceptions that we'll need to work through. Although I keep stressing that not everything can be an exception and we'll have to work through those. But the next most important thing is that the feedback we've received so far and the feedback that we're continuing to get through this forum and others is also going to inform our implementation. There's lots of valuable input that we got that you may not see representing a specific word change in the draft strategic plan, but it's still going to be useful and something we'll be utilizing with implementation. So next steps, we expect feedback from OMB and Congress, say in November. The final draft is due back to OMB in December, and the strategic plan would be issued in February. So this is, again, no different than the same process that your agencies have had to use, and we look forward to talking with you about the specifics, but I just wanted to give a little overview.
So I would say today's mostly about the strategic objectives, but as we led off, our 4 goals from our previous strategic plan remain the same. And within agency services, which is generally 40 to 45% of the National Archives staff, is dedicated each and every day to providing services to other federal agencies. We're hearing today from 2 of the programs, records management through the Office of the Chief Records Officer and the Federal Records Center program. Those 2 are the ones that lead this BRIDG effort. But we also have a speaker today, Amy Bennett, who will be from the Office of Government Information Services, where we help agencies with FOIA activities. That's also part of NAR's agency services group. The archivist mentioned our dedication to declassification, which we do along with you through the National Declassification Center. And we also, at the other end of the spectrum, remain firmly committed to our role in protecting national security through the Information Security Oversight Office. But we are wholeheartedly dedicated to the 4 goals. Each and every day, we make access happen with the records that we have. We connect with customers either through Lawrence and his group with the appraisal archivist. You'll see we have a lot of account managers here from the Record Center program. So we're very dedicated to the connecting with customers, maximizing our value, and also, as I said, because the bulk of the National Archives staff is in agency services, we're each and every day trying to make sure that we are ensuring our future through our people.
So not to belabor the point, but I really do want to continue to express NARA's appreciation for your comments. We received a large number and a wide range of comments from agencies and likely many from many of you in this room. It really did more than just sort of make a better document. It made a better plan. And it is words that we plan to implement. It's not just a piece of paper that we produced. And so, yes, we absolutely heard your comments and we took those back on the 2022 goal. We also added a goal based on responses from you and your agencies to make a commitment to provide the policies and procedures. But there's a third thing that I want to point out, and that is we also heard feedback that said, we as customers want to make sure that your staff are trained and capable, understand the goals, and are capable of executing the policies. And so I will briefly mention that we made a third sort of significant change between the 2 drafts, and that was in our 4th goal, build our people through our future. We've made an explicit commitment. It's an explicit commitment for our own personal, selfish interests of making sure we take our staff with us, but it's also a commitment to you that our staff will be prepared and have appropriate training to execute the policies and the plans that we put forth in the strategic plan.
Thanks. So I just wanted to add one thing before we go into Q&A, because I know there are probably a lot of questions here in the room and online as well. A lot of what we're doing, especially with the big goal, and a lot of the comments, and Michael, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the comments we received were around this goal 3.2, the 2022 goal. And I think my sense of the gist of those comments is that everybody who works in records management understands the vision of this goal and what it means and can relate to it and understand it and want to work with us to achieve it. And I think a lot of the comments and questions related to implementation, and we understand that's where we need to work together to solve those challenges. I think fundamentally, I think all of us can agree, hopefully, that what we're trying to do with this goal is a logical extension of what we have done with the Managing Government Records Directive in getting towards the 2019 goal and the 2016 goal related to email, in making sure that to the largest and greatest extent possible that we are working electronically. So we see that certainly as the intent in trying to create a digital archives, and I know that's the archivist's vision, and that's what he was talking about just a couple of minutes ago. So there's still work to do, and we understand that, and we realize that, and we want to hear from you, and be able to, over the next several years, be able to work with you more closely to be successful on this goal. So I think maybe now we can open it up for some questions. And I think, Jim, you're monitoring the online. If we have anything that comes online, please, just a reminder to identify yourself and the agency that you work for.
So, Lawrence, while we're waiting for the first question to come in, it's important that if you haven't had the opportunity yet, go to our website, or maybe Lawrence's team will push it out. But the draft plan as it was submitted to OMB is available on our website. And for those of you that saw what we pushed out for comment, there's a pretty marked difference. The more recent one contains more of the meat, more of the substance, more of the strategies that we're going to be further developing. And we'll give you a little bit more insight as to what we're doing and how we intend to get there. I know this group all too well to know that there have to be questions. So let me talk about a couple of common things we've heard elsewhere and some conceptions and things that have come up. So one of the things that has come up time and time again is that does this apply to certain bodies of records? So does it apply to classified records? The answer is yes. Does it apply to the records of the administration? Does it apply to records of Congress? Those are things where, it's our intent, yes, and we're working with those stakeholders to figure out what this means, just like we're going to be working with each of you to figure out what does this mean for your agency. What else?
I think some of the questions that we've had, understandably, related to ERA and how ERA sort of fits into this, both in the unclassified and the classified world. And we just wanted to assure everyone that we are continuing our development of ERA 2.0 and the processes that will allow us to accession records electronically. We expect over the next couple of years with classified ERA to follow sometime around the FY 2020, 2021 timeframe to be able to have the ability to support transfers of electronic records. We currently already have the ability to process and preserve classified records and electronic records, but we'll be working over the next several years to improve those processes as well. And I know that's been a concern over the years, but something that we take very seriously and are continuing to work on.
Good morning. Thank you for the dialogue here. I'm Tom Lee from the Air Force Records Office. Question here. When agencies submit what is known as a notification to the National Archives wanting to digitize various permanent analog records in terms of trying to make sure that the analog records can be disposed while the digitized records would be accessioned as the official records. How would that process change in this construct? We're just curious if NARA is going to waive that notification process or do something that will make it much easier to facilitate this goal at the end of calendar year 2022. Also related to that, the Air Force, along with our sister military departments, have a lot of official military personnel files at the National Personnel Records Center in St. Louis, Missouri. We're wondering if that is under this edict from the National Archives. Thank you.
So
Yeah, why don't you,
I'll do
you-
the
yeah, you do that one, I'll
second
do the
part
first
of the
one.
question, and Lawrence can have the first.
I don't
and
want the second one.
This will seem kind of seamless. So as Jay Pasenko, the Chief Operating Officer, said, yes, it's our intent that this edict, as you said, would cover the National Personnel Records Center. The 99.999% of all of the OMPFs that were in analog, and in this case analog being mostly textual, though sometimes it was microfilm or microfiche, is already at our facility in St. Louis. It's either at the Archives Drive facility or the Valmeyer facility. And we've been servicing those paper records on behalf of DoD for decades. We've also been more recently helping DoD by servicing the records that we don't have that are in electronic format but are in your DPRIS system. For the Army and others, we've been able to go into that system on behalf of the armed services and provide reference activity for those records. So it is our intent that, by and large, we already have all of the textual OMPFs that we're going to get, and we will continue to store those safely. We will transition those to the Archives of the United States when they're more than 62 years old. And it's our intent to continue to help DoD by serving the OMPFs that are already in electronic format through the DPRIS system. So it does cover NPRC, but we think we've got that under control. I'll let Lawrence handle the scheduling part.
Right, so for part one of Tommy's question, so if agencies are scanning, digitizing records that were previously approved in paper form, Currently, the regs do provide for the notification process where you can submit us the notification, and we will streamline the processing of that so that we can get you approval to be able to destroy records via the GRS once the permanent records have been scanned. We are looking at ways we can improve things, make them better. We are currently looking at our internal processes to see where we can make improvements. And we are seriously considering that part of the process and how we can either improve the notification process or through another mechanism be able to do it a little more expeditiously. So stay tuned.
And I think we'd appreciate hearing from you. If you have experience through the notification process, and maybe there's better ways from the customer perspective to do it, or there may be completely different ways to do it. And certainly your experiences would help us to develop a better process.
Absolutely.
So you'll see in the strategic plan, one of the strategies we've highlighted is to establish appraisal, scheduling, and pre-accessioning processes that reflect modern electronic records management. And the reality is, we're always trying to do better. We recognize some of the challenges that are out there ourselves, but a lot of our processes, and likely a lot of your processes, have sort of been developed around a very paper-based world, and we've all been sort of trying to cobble our way through dealing with the electronic at the same time we're dealing with the paper. So looking at all of our policies and processes for the work that we all do is going to be a critical part of this.
Absolutely. Greg? Yes.
Schildmeyer, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. So I understand getting this policy out to records managers, but we don't drive agency practices. What efforts is NARA making to make this policy known to agency heads, to IT people, others who can really affect the decisions of the agencies?
So when a similar question came up at the Federal Records Council meeting, the way I answered it, and I've had plenty of time to reflect on that since then, and I think it still works. We have all struggled, if you will, for some time to have a vehicle for discussions both with senior folks within our agencies to bring more attention to records management, to have these conversations with OMB, with Congress, with your CIO shops, all the key stakeholders that we have. We've all struggled with this need to bring more attention and more resources to records management. And one of the key things that we expect to come out of this strategic plan is it serves as a framework for those discussions, right? So we're already beginning conversations with OMB. The archivist mentioned that these will be things that he's raising with folks. We're raising them through our extended network, whether it's through our CIO and the CIO Council, our IG, through SIGI, our Chief FOIA Officer, through all of our contacts we're trying to push this out. And that's one of the reasons we started with such a broad dissemination of the plan for comment as well. So it's absolutely our goal to get this into as many people's hands and to have as many of those senior level discussions so that we're building support not just for what we're trying to do, but what we're trying to do is also help you as you're right now trying to manage with limited resources both the paper-based piece and the electronic piece.
One thing I could just add to that is a lot of the work that you do every year really helps us figure out where we need to target communications, policies, resources with the reporting that you provide and that the senior agency officials for records management provide. So we ask a lot of questions related to the strategic goals, strategic objectives, broad directive, managing government records directive objectives, and it gives us information that sort of allows us to assess where the government is and where we need to focus our resources in helping you. So we're going to be doing that again as you see the questions come out in later first quarter of this year. And we will take that data and figure out the best way to use it. I mean, to be more direct to your question, Greg, is, how do we create a communication plan for reaching all segments and layers of an agency so that we can all be on the same page? So we're going to have meetings with senior agency officials for records management. We're looking at contacts with the CIO Council, the ERM Automation Working Group, our communities of interest, the FRMC and the FRON, and taking feedback and figuring out a way to target the best response so that we can move things forward. So hopefully that will get to what you are hoping to see.
And since I still have the microphone, I'll ask a second question. As I interpret the goal for 2022, when you talk about not accepting temporary records, I interpret that to mean the federal record centers are no longer going to take any paper records come January of 2023. Is that an incorrect interpretation?
No, that's the intent. To the fullest extent possible.
To the fullest
that's
extent
the
possible,
intent.
yes.
Hey, Lawrence, we have a question coming in from somebody watching on YouTube.
Okay, and then we'll go over into that corner.
Yeah, I'll pass the microphone back. So Gregory Herod from the Border Patrol asks, does NARA have any plans to create a standardized GRS digital file that agencies can acquire to share with vendors as part of an agency's acquisition and implementation of an ERM system?
Okay. Thanks for the question, Greg. We are working on initiatives, and you can read a lot more about it on our blog, Records Express. An initiative we call FERMI, Federal Electronic Records Modernization Initiative. I mentioned earlier about an industry day that we're doing and working with GSA, and what we're trying to do is to develop ways to simplify acquisition of tools that will have the ERM requirements that we've developed this year baked in, where vendors can self-certify against those requirements, which hopefully results in tools that will address Greg's question. And in other words, how can we more easily and more effectively, more cost efficiently manage electronic records across the government? And that's what we're trying to do with our FERMI initiative. And those are really, we've been working on it for a year, and there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, a lot of socialization, communication that's happening right now. But I encourage you to look at our requirements and our posts on our blog to get up to speed on the various things that we're doing related to FERMI that are sort of intended to meet that objective.
Hi, I'm Bill McClements from MSPB, and most of our records are paper-based. We don't have the technology for electronic records, so I'm just wondering if we had to, if we could send our records to a commercial record center.
So one of the things that sort of ties in with the last question as well, that we're going to be doing throughout this process is greater engagement with the private sector to develop capabilities. So that includes, in the software community, but it also includes in the record storage vendor community as well.
Chris?
Hi, Chris Bartlett from U.S. Geological Survey. I have a question related to goal 3.1 related to inspections. The way you describe it here, it's very focused on the format and the accessibility, it seems. Are you going to tie it into the records management self-assessments at all? How are you deciding who you're going to be evaluating, essentially?
So that's a secret we're not going to share.
So we know how to code our answers to...
So essentially what we're doing with the goal is we set a target for how many agencies we want to do based on the agencies that are subject to the Federal Records Act. So we are looking at a variety of criteria in determining who we were going to want to inspect over the next several years. The RMSA is a data point that we do use, as is the other reporting products that we have. There are certainly other things, high profile attention, media attention, large number of unauthorized disposition allegations. There are a number of things that we have built into our internal processes that we evaluate when determining where we might want to do an inspection with an agency.
And the word inspection, of course, is a very formal term, and it
Exactly.
has certain meanings associated with it. But we've been talking a great deal about how we do oversight. Inspections are part of that, and how we can extend our reach and sort of shifting our goal or our efforts so that you're not just sort of sitting there going, okay, well, they came and visited me last year, so I guess I'm good for the next 5 years. I don't have to worry about that. We're trying to look at it more from the perspective of how do we, as an executive branch, how do we improve records management? So are there things we can go out and do a cross-cutting but more narrowly focused assessment and then share the results broadly so that they can be beneficial to others? So we're looking at continuing sort of this traditional inspection role, but growing the oversight and trying to make it more value added for the broader community.
Right.
And you just kind of touched on the point that I was just about to make too, is when you have certain agencies that are very common themes, like science-based agencies versus financial and such. And also, not just to, I wasn't trying to avoid the inspection per se as much as, is there also an opportunity for volunteering as well?
Absolutely. And I'd like to just add, great points that Jay made there, is if you come back or tune in to the December BRIDG meeting, we're going to do a more expansive update on oversight. Don Rosen, who's our Director of Oversight, is in Orlando, Florida at the ARMA conference right now. So we are preparing things so that we can talk about some of the new things that Jay mentioned when we come back in December.
So Lawrence, Jonathan Dice, who says he's an interested citizen, asked, how will digital records be made available to the general public and researchers when infrastructure seems to be lacking to support such massive digitization?
For a second, I thought you were handing the mic to the archivist.
He quickly ended.
So we absolutely recognize that one of the things that we have to do, I mean, our number one goal is make access happen. So this whole process is set up so that the records are available and they can eventually be discovered and used. And the structures, whether it's the policies and procedures, whether it's the actual infrastructure that allows the public to access digitized records, all of that is going to be getting additional attention, and we'll be trying to make it more efficient and effective going forward. But it's a great question, and it ties into sort of why we're all here.
Good morning. Hear me? Good morning. This is Marcus Smallwood from Department of Housing and Urban Development. And maybe this was stated already and I just missed it, but can someone speak to what the plans are as far as codifying some of these expectations for the departments and the agencies? I know for the 2012 directive, there was a draft of CFR that was released, and we provided a lot of review and comments to it. And I think certain parts of the CFR, specifically I think it was 36 CFR Chapter 12, had been updated in the Code of Federal Regulations. But I think we were still, and maybe this has happened but I haven't noticed, but we're still waiting for some of those updates to be released. And I don't know if it's still the intent to fully update the CFR, but then with these additional requirements coming down the pipeline, would that then be included in terms of expectation to update the CFR so that it's not, it'd still be an unfunded mandate, but at least there would be some meat behind it in terms of when we go back to the table with our stakeholders?
So, first of all, let me share with you, obviously Title 44 United States Code, right? The law comes above the regulation. That actually was updated in I believe, 2014. And that incorporated both new direction from Congress and more explicitly included, sort of inserted electronic records and email into our sort of older sort of rules. And that's the PRA and FRA Amendments Act of 2014. It also incorporated some of those elements from the Managing Government Records Directive. So there is some degree of codification already. Now, I appreciate that we did a fair amount of work on regulatory changes, proposed regulatory changes, but I wouldn't say that they necessarily would have fully sort of adopted both the principles and the requirements of the Managing Government Records Directive. And so that's why we didn't roll it out immediately. So we withheld that. So we did not update the code, although I appreciate the time and effort of the people in this room, both on the NARA side and the agencies who helped to get us to that point. But it didn't quite get us far enough. And now with this new sort of goal in the strategic plan, we need to be even more sort of leading edge. We need to be more progressive in what goes into the regulation. And the course of doing that requires us to have conversations like this today. You should consider this as a first step or a predecessor to us getting to some future changes and some of those codification. What we don't want to do is codify a bunch of changes without hearing from, and really not just hearing from, but engaging our customers and figuring out something that makes sense. You should anticipate that. Before you get that, you will get, and this goes back to the previous question, we cannot make commitments on behalf of the administration. However, we can tell you that we have received a huge amount of interest over the course of the summer in this, and you should expect policies and regulatory actions short of new regulations like the bulletins that you receive. You should anticipate a lot of that. You should anticipate getting a lot of materials that are on a sheet of paper with the signature of somebody and some numbers in front that you can take to your SAORM or take to your leadership. What we're not going to do, and what I'm sort of hearing, and that's why I want to get out in front of this, I'm hearing we're not going to leave you hanging. We're not going to give you as individuals, record officers or record liaison, a bunch of requirements that your senior leadership haven't ever heard of.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Hi, Tracy Taylor with IRS. And I guess given the scope and scale of our interagency agreement, I sure hope some of the paper exceptions apply to us. I have two other comments, and one almost seems like a simple policy question. But as it relates to record scheduling and media neutrality, will there be any relaxing on the application of that? And to the gentleman in the back, his earlier question to confirm that, 2022 means no paper records at the FRC. Does that also mean, I guess, that you'll be ready to receive electronic records at the FRC at that point?
So you want to do the last one first, or?
No, you can go first.
You want me to go first? Okay. So Tracy, your question about relaxing media neutrality, I mean, we still have a responsibility to do the appraisal work that is statutorily required. So we are going to be looking at our process, as I mentioned before, see what makes the most sense. We'd love to hear from you to get your feedback, and as we develop proposals, as we review our own internal processes, whether we go forward with notifications or some other method, we will be looking to you and other agencies to help us sort it out. And we want to make sure that we come up with a process that is as streamlined and effective, allows us to make sure that we are appraising the records that we need to appraise, and allowing you to effectively, efficiently dispose of the records that are eligible and appropriate for disposal. So stay tuned, I guess, is my answer.
All right. So I was hoping that was the harder part of the question, but it wasn't. So, where electronic records are, outputted still to some sort of tangible media, the Record Center program today takes those. They have an electronic records vault that they can keep those kind of records in. We mentioned earlier with the NPRC and a few others where we're able to access electronic systems that other federal agencies have, where the records are now stored, but we continue to be their service provider. Where we were doing it with paper, we can go into an electronic system and continue to help you on the reference side. I don't see us developing, outside of ERA, where ERA will be working with the permanent records that can be accessioned into the Archives of the United States. That's the solution that we're working on. That's what we need to focus on as an agency, as the archivist led off. That's been our mandate since 1934. Obviously, it wasn't about electronic records in 1934, but that's what the National Archives has been about. and will continue to. And as Jay Pasenko, the COO, said earlier, part of our role, along with you, over the next 5 years and beyond, is to work with industry on solutions that the executive branch and the legislative and judicial branches need to manage electronic records, whether that's in software or some sort of other services. But I'll be very clear, I don't see the FRC offering something like ERA.
Okay, thank you for that. And just a quick follow-up then. What do you see the future role of the FRC then?
First and foremost, they're sitting on over 28 million cubic feet of analog records. They will continue to store and service those records. They are at the National Personnel Records Center. We're it for personnel records, and I continue to see us having that role. We have a lot of document conversion unit capabilities. I continue to see us doing that. I see us working with, within those 28 million cubic feet, those that are permanent, working with the federal agencies to get those accessioned into the Archives of the United States, and continuing to work with you and the industry on what records management, again, in software or other types of services, need to happen in the next 5 years and beyond.
And it's not just the 28 million cubic feet we're storing and servicing now. It's all those materials that are identified and are transferred prior to December 31st of 2022 as well. So the idea here, if any of your agencies were starting, a new mission area or starting a new project, you start with sort of assessing what the landscape looks like. And so far, when it's been exceptionally challenging for agencies and NARA when we're dealing with both the analog world and the electronic records world. We're trying to maintain, costly, complex infrastructures for both. And the idea here is to do some hard assessments between now and 2022 to figure out what we've got in the analog world and address it. And it's not going to be easy, but we're going to be working side by side with you to try and figure this out and come up with a solution.
Okay, I promise. Last follow-up. Okay, so maybe you're going to expect an influx of transfers here shortly. And can you please confirm to me what you mean by analog? Is that meant as paper? Is it an exception to paper? Is it a third category of electronic, or another category of electronic record?
Everything except the electronic records. So all media types other than the electronic records.
I think we have time for maybe one more question.
Hi, Michelle Curry from Executive Office for Immigration Review under Department of Justice. I guess the first question I have is, and I'm understanding that December 31st, 2022 is the date that we would be sending. So for instance, we have files right now that are cut off that are in that period where we would normally be keeping them on site. And now I'm like, oh no, we're gonna pre-accession all of that to you tomorrow.
I was going to say, don't wait till December 31st, 2022.
Right.
But okay.
So it's the date that we're actually giving them to you. It's not the date that, because there's the cutoff and then the transfer.
Right, it's not the creation date.
It's not, okay, thank you. And then the other question is just, for the electronic records, so this is sort of a follow-on, I guess, of the, what are the FRCs going to do and what do you mean by electronic? Because we get tons of paper from immigrants, obviously. So we're going to turn into a scanning center. As a result of 3.2, we're going to have scanning centers at the courts to take all of the paper that people are bringing us and, put it into some sort of electronic thing. Ordinarily, I would say, okay, well, we would put these things onto CDs and give them to you, because the unfortunate thing for us is that most of our schedules are long-term temporary, right? They might as well be permanent. They're 50 plus years. But obsolescence issues, you all only take care of obsolescence for permanent records, not for temporary records. That's our responsibility. So there would I can't see any reason why I would ever use the FRC after this, because I'm going to have to pull things back, whether they're on a hard drive, external drive, or some sort of whatever we have that's electronic in 2022 that's better than a external drive, or a CD, to make sure that there's no obsolescence issues every 10 years. I mean, otherwise I'm just going to keep them all in-house and get rid of them, right? Get rid of them at the appropriate, properly dispose of them.
Yes.
Properly dispose of them at
Thank
the
you for that
appropriate
clarification.
time.
So
In accordance with the record schedule, signed by the Archivist of the United States.
I think what your question, and by the way, duly noted for the record with respect to all, but I think what your question highlights is sort of what we're at here, which is we need a framework to come up with long-term solutions for some of our business processes. Absent that framework, the status quo very often wins out, if only because of inertia. So we're going to have to sit down with you. There's going to have to be conversations within your agency, and I'm making this broad, not just this really applies to all of us. This applies, I mean, this is something we're doing at the National Archives, is sort of saying, what are our processes? What are the ways that records are being generated now, and how might we make this shift? And in some cases, it's going to be a breeze. In other cases, it's going to be incredibly tough. And in some cases, the infrastructure and the volume may be so massive that it's going to truly require some engagement with Congress, OMB, or in some cases there will be exceptions, and we'll work through those with you.
Yeah, well, I think the question really underscores the need that for the next 5 years, we need to be having these kind of conversations between the federal agencies and the National Archives, but along with Congress and OMB to figure out what is the best solution. But we really need to keep focused on that this was not something where NARA set out to be punitive. We're trying to support the need to move to a digital government. This was the best way we saw over the next 5 years and beyond to help move the government to a more digital environment. And, I think I speak for all of us. We are all encountering that today. We try to congratulate ourselves on a lot of the customer service that we provide. Our metrics for turnaround with reference, et cetera, are at all-time high levels. But each time we start to kind of congratulate ourselves, there's a little voice saying, but the customer expectation is really changing. They're not looking for this folder to come back in the next 24 hours. They're looking for, they're at their keyboard and the information appears. And the federal government is not there today, but it does need to get there.
So that sounds like a really good point to conclude this panel. I know there may be some other questions. Please send us questions, comments. I'm sorry.
Did you want to do one more? I know you were closing it off.
I really think we need to move on. We've got a lot of other things we need to cover. But what I wanted to say is RM Communications, please send us your questions, your comments. Marcus, I know you had a follow-up that I think you wanted to ask. We will be here this afternoon, as I mentioned, the meet and greet, 1 to 3, up in the presidential rooms. I will hang around. By all means, come talk to me this afternoon after you go have lunch. And otherwise, please send comments, thoughts, concerns to RM Communications, and we will make sure that if I can't answer, one of these 3 gentlemen up here, I'm sure can, and we will continue the discussion. So thank you all, and I think we will proceed to our next segment.
Hi, I'm Jefferson Lunsford. I'm the Chief Financial Analyst for the Federal Records Center program. I'm here to talk about rates, but before we get into that, I think it's important to take a moment and reflect on sort of the bravery and the clarity of thought and the vision that our leadership team had when they came up with this new set of objectives. I think it really acknowledges that there is a future that's different from our present, and incorporating the goal into our strategic plan really allows us to shape our path into the future rather than being sort of subject to the future as it comes at us. I wish that was my thought. I wish that was my quote, but Jay Bosenko explained the strategic plan to me at some point. We had an aside, and that's the way he put it, and I think that really makes sense, and that helps us, within the Federal Records Center program, reevaluate our own programmatic strategic plan and try to figure out how we fit into the new direction that NARA is taking us. And I appreciate the questions about what does this mean for the FRCP, because we're asking ourselves the same thing. And as we meet as a leadership team and as we develop goals and objectives and reflect on the new direction that we're having, hopefully we'll have a little bit more clarity, not only for ourselves, but also for you, so that we can continue our partnership into the future. So in light of the new challenges that the plan brings to us, we can't forget that we have to maintain financial stability and we have to maintain the high levels of customer service that we give to you. And it was in the context of those three things that I set out to develop the 2018 and 2019 rates. I don't want to steal my own thunder. But this is the changes that we're going to see in the 2018 rates. These actually were released, I think, a week or two ago, so you should have the entire schedule as an attachment to your 2018 agreement. But these are the changes that you'll see in the rates. Temporary and reserve storage are increasing by 1 penny to 24 cents. Permanent storage is increasing by a penny to 29 cents. The OMPF correspondence rate is going up by $1.75. That's a DoD-specific rate that reflects the cost of doing services for OMPFs in St. Louis. And we've increased the labor rates by some inflationary increase. All told, most of the rates that are changing are going up by between 3% and 5%, but certainly that's not reflective of the entire cost increase for your agreement. Those are just line item rates that are going up. If the rates are not listed here, they're the same as 2017. There will be a new rate in 2018 for the storage of controlled unclassified information, CUI specific, and I believe we have a topic later on to talk about what that means. I'm by no means the subject matter experts on CUI, but I've met with our team who's working through our SOPs and implementation plans, and we arrived at 55 cents as a way of sort of acknowledging the additional cost of protecting records that are slightly more sensitive than the temporary records, but not quite classified. So more to come on that. And in response to some of the feedback that we got about the timing of the rates and how they tend to be out of sync with the budget cycle, this year, for the first time, we are also introducing next year's rates. So this will be the rate schedule for 2019. We tried our best to avoid major rate increases. I know storage is a big deal, and we don't raise that lightly, but we had to in 2018. In 2019, the primary rate that we're increasing is that OMPF storage. OMPF correspondence. Again, DoD specific in St. Louis. That again is about 3 or 4% increase. The big news for 2019 is that there will be another section of rates, sort of a suite of rates under the storage category to acknowledge the cost of storing unscheduled records and records that are past their disposal dates. Generally about 10 cents higher than existing storage rates, and they're sort of analog rates to the existing schedule. So if temporary is 24 cents a month, then storing an unscheduled record past its disposal date would be 34 cents, or actually I think that one is 35 cents. So it's, we take each sort of standard storage category, and if it falls either as an unscheduled record or past disposal, that fee will be about 10 cents higher per month. For next year, if I'm invited back on the stage, I'll review those 2019 rates. We don't think they're going to change, but we sort of reserve the right to edit as needed. As you know, if anything does come up, we may have to issue a revision to the 2019 rate schedule. But I'll also be able to present to you the 2020 rates. So we're going to sort of institutionalize or bake in this advanced rate schedule so that you'll always know a year in advance. And hopefully that will help you plan your budget, do some resource allocation and that sort of thing. And it will allow us to get our interagency agreements signed and approved, hopefully much earlier in the summer. And that will sort of make administratively everything go a little bit smoother. So that is actually all I have. I mean, they talked for an hour. I got like 10 minutes. But I could probably take one or two quick questions if anybody has anything.
$0.10 higher. Was that 10 on top of the 24 from the previous slide?
Yes.
So we're talking about 34 cents.
It would be 34 cents if that record is not scheduled or if it's past its disposal.
If it's past its
date.
disposal.
24 cents if it's, sort of everything's checked off.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
sure.
I have one question. Regarding the 10% charge, what if the record's under freeze? Would that charge still be charged or would that be suspended as long as the freeze is being held?
No, if it's a valid freeze, the standard rate would apply. There wouldn't be any sort of penalty for that. And I think we're going to take, a soft and gentle hand when it comes to implementing these rates. I know records past their disposal dates. There's a lot of nuance in that. So we're not going to come in hard and fast on implementing these additional storage rates. But we do want to acknowledge that these categories of records tend to be, I could say problematic, but they tend to fill up our shelves with sort of records that have sort of questionable retention. So we really want to clean things up, especially in light of the 2022 deadline. We want to make sure that we're storing important records. So. All right. Thank you so much. Oh, sorry.
If you want to wait off the podium so they can catch you on the recording. There's a question from Becky Remington that says, how does NARA come up with the cost for storage? Is there a graphic on the NARA website someplace?
So the question is, where do these rates come from? How do we come up with a cost for storage? I could talk for hours on that, but I'm not going to. We have, I think, 18 federal record centers nationwide, and we have a single national storage rate. So it is a blended rate that takes into account the cost of owning and operating our facilities, including utilities and security, and sort of the capacity of our total system. It's a complex web of numbers that gets to our storage rates. The good news is, as it has always been since we became reimbursable, is that we are legally prohibited from making more than 4% profit. I shouldn't say profit. From retaining more than 4% of our revenue in excess of our expenses. So we are an at-cost operation. So the unit rate for storage is essentially what it costs us to store a record. So. Okay, thanks again.
Amy, I'm not sure, we're running actually 2 minutes ahead of schedule, so I'm not sure if Amy Bennett has arrived. So we will move on to the next segment, and then we will come back. All these transitions. So you're getting a preview right now. Probably was an easier way to do this. Okay, so it looks like next up is Arthur. Rashad? Technical support, someone who can actually get to the slide.
There it is.
Ah, there we go.
Good morning. My name is Rashad Shakir, and I am the Information Security Program Manager and the CUI Program Manager for the Federal Record Center program. We thought that doing this bridge meeting for the new FY would be a good opportunity for the Federal Record Center program to bring to the attention of the records management community our program for servicing and safeguarding your CUI records. Of course, CUI is controlled and classified information that the Information Security Oversight Office executed its implementing regulation last, I think, September. So since then, the Federal Record Center program has tried to anticipate for the Record Center community exactly what your CUI program records needs would be. So let's just take just a second to kind of take a look at the graphic, because I'm going to try to stick to the graphic. First, all of our federal record centers, the 18 federal record centers, can store controlled and classified information. Please take particular attention to the second bullet. Our federal record centers in San Bruno, Kansas City, and WNRC, these are going to be the federal record centers where we're going to store all of the special handling for the CUI specified. What we mean is that some CUI is going to require some upgraded safeguarding, i.e. vault, cage, something along those lines, because the record is so sensitive that we can't store it in our general federal record centers without some enhanced safeguarding. So what we did was, over the course of the year, we took the liberty of anticipating what your CUI needs were going to be with respect for these very, very sensitive records. And what we're going to do is we're going to store them regionally. Our San Bruno facility is going to be our West Coast facility. Kansas City, obviously, is going to be our middle of the country facility. And WNRC, which is right here in beautiful downtown Washington, more or less, is going to be our East Coast facility. Now, in the future, we may see a need to kind of expand that out to other parts of the country, but we feel that for right now, those 3 record centers should be adequate to store any unclassified information that is particularly sensitive. And what we mean by particularly sensitive, some examples of that would be an MPI nuclear program, Navy nuclear power program that's not exactly classified, but yet it is still very sensitive. We're working very closely with the Navy as we speak to store those records out in San Bruno. And I think another example would be like some witness protection files, like if the witness was in protective custody or something like that, or a protective program. Obviously, those records are extremely sensitive, and they're going to need some enhanced safeguarding. So those kind of records are going to be the type when we talk about enhanced safeguarding. They're not exactly classified, so we don't have to put them into a certified vault, but yet agencies may feel we really, really want to safeguard these at a much, much higher level than just in a federal record center. So those kind of records we're going to begin storing regionally. Let's see what this thing. Obviously, all of our federal record centers are staffed by U.S. citizens and federal employees who have undergone specialized training in how to handle CUI records. We're in that process as we speak. I'm going to be the one who's going to be doing the training for all of our federal record centers, so therefore there is uniformity, and we anticipate that training to be completed in the very, very near future. So we realize that we're probably maybe a step ahead of most agencies in identifying their CUI records, and that's kind of where we wanted to be, because we wanted to give you a chance to kind of catch up, but at the same time know that the Federal Record Center program is ready. because we wanted to be ready when you're ready and not following behind you. We wanted to lead this effort. So that is what our program has been engineered to do. Obviously, we are compliant with the executive order and the ISO implementing directive for protecting CUI, and we have been working very closely with ISO to make sure that our enhanced facilities, California, West Coast, Midwest, and here on the East Coast are compliant with what ISO pretty much expects us to do. So the idea is that we wanted to go by the ISO implementing regulation and make sure that we were hand in glove so that there was no gap. For getting your records to us and for referencing servicing, we're going to continue to use ARCIS. Those of you that are familiar with ARCIS, we're working on ARCIS right now to kind of get it up to speed, to take any records that are identified as CUI. I think right now those records are identified as SBU/CUI, so I think that's the terminology that we're probably using right now. But we're looking to kind of upgrade ARCIS in the very near future. When I say near future, I mean this calendar year, to get it so that when you do have records that are identified as strictly as CUI, you can use the ARCIS portal in order to do that. I'm not a big ARCIS guy, so I don't really know what the details of how you would do that with ARCIS, but I'm pretty sure that we could field your questions through the regular way that you ask about ARCIS, and through your customer service representatives. Your account managers. I always get that wrong. Sorry. Okay. So the whole idea is that for the Federal Records Center to kind of be proactive in identifying what your CUI records needs are. Now, to that end, over the summer, what we've tried to do is we tried to do the homework, and we tried to identify, well, not tried, we identified over 35 agencies who we think that your records are CUI right now and are residing in our Federal Records Center. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be reaching out to you in the very near future through our account managers and trying to have those conversations with you to anticipate what your needs are going to be. So please look forward to that happening very, very, very soon. We wanted to use this vehicle as our first outreach, and on the 26th of October is going to be the open house, the ISO open house. And at the ISO open house, we're going to have a more considerable footprint. We're going to have our account managers out in the lobby. We're going to have a booth. And our objective is to be there for you when you are ready for us. So we want to be proactive. We want to market this program and let you know that if you have any CUI needs, the Federal Records Center is going to be there and prepared in order to handle them. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashad. I think we're going to adjust the schedule again. Jim, I don't know, technical support maybe? Oh, I'm sorry. We're good.
Yes.
Amy and Alina are hiding in the crowd. So Amy, please come up here, and you can send the slides back to the previous segment. So I'll just set this up. I'm sure Amy will talk about it in a little bit more detail, but I'm sure many of you are familiar, if you submitted the RMSA, that there were a few questions on there related to FOIA. And what we tried to do in working with Alina and Otis and Amy is try and tighten that connection between FOIA and records management. And I know for some people that might have been easy if you were doing the same job. For others, maybe you had to go talk to somebody else in your agency about who does FOIA. So Amy is here to talk about some of the lessons learned and some of the data that she captured through the responses that we received through the RMSA. And as you all saw with the preview, as I was flipping through, there's some very nice charts and graphs that I'm sure she will walk us through. And we'll see what questions we have about FOIA and where we go from here. It's up to you, Amy.
So thank you so much, Lawrence, and his team for inviting us to speak to you all today. I also want to start off by thanking everyone in this room for all the work that you do to make sure that your agency has a good records management program. I've spent more than a decade now working to advance open government and the public's ability to access records through the Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA. And that would not be possible without all of your work, and I know that it's often underappreciated. So, I want to begin by giving you a round of applause, and I hope that you'll join me in really saying thank you. So now that I have that off my chest, I want to move on to the topic that I was actually asked to talk about today. And as Lawrence said, that is FOIA lessons from the RMSA. So before I begin, I'm going to give you a quick overview of the topics I'm going to cover. First, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my office and where we fit into the federal landscape. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about why we decided to put FOIA questions in the last iteration of the RMSA. Next, I'll go through some of the results that we think are of particular interest to this audience, and then give you a little preview of what we're thinking in the future. So I know it didn't go well for a certain vice presidential candidate, but I do think it's always a good idea to start off a presentation with answering the question of, who am I and why am I here? Hopefully I'm young enough for that joke to go over well, and you all are old enough to get that timely H. Ross Perot presidential candidate reference. So my name is Amy Bennett, and I'm a management and program analyst with the Office of Government Information Services. If you go to BRIDG meetings a lot, you've probably seen this slide before. Lawrence has been kind enough to put us on your agenda a couple of times, so I promise I'm not going to spend too much time on this topic. But just so you know, Congress created us in 2007 as part of the Open Government Act, and we were given the responsibility to serve as the FOIA ombudsman. Congress placed this within the National Archives in recognition of the alignment between our functions and the National Archives' mission to provide access to government records. The latest FOIA bill, which President Obama signed into effect in June 2016, made some pretty substantial changes to my office, but our two primary functions stayed the same. We provide mediation services to resolve disputes between requesters and agencies, and we review agencies' FOIA policies, procedures, and compliance. So reviewing agencies' FOIA policies, procedures, and compliance is a really big job. As you might know, there are more than 100 agencies that are subject to FOIA. And within those particularly large departments, there are FOIA offices that operate under vastly different FOIA programs, policies, and procedures. And we have a very small staff of only about 10 people. And only 2 of those people actually work on reviewing agencies' policies and procedures. So given that small staff, how on earth can we gather any information about how FOIA is operating across the government? Well, we rely on a couple of our different programs and through some of the bodies that we chair. The first way we observe agency practices is through our mediation cases. At this point, we have helped resolve disputes between requesters and about 100 some odd agencies, or the vast majority of the 100 some odd agencies that are subject to FOIA. Our compliance program also includes an agency assessment program. And during an assessment, we do a really deep dive on an agency's operations in order to get a solid sense of how they're operating and the specific challenges that they're facing. And then we develop targeted recommendations for how the agency can improve its FOIA performance. I should say that this is a completely voluntary assessment program. We are not an IG. We are not GAO. We cannot force you to participate. But we've had a really good reception from agencies of the recommendations that we've made at this point. Agencies have reported back to us that they've acted on about 97% of them. So I think that shows that they find our program useful. Due to a lack of capacity, though, we project it's going to take us about 25 years to assess all the agency FOIA programs. We fill in some of those gaps through our interactions with the chief FOIA officers through the Chief FOIA Officer Council. This was a body that was created by the FOIA Improvement Act of 2016, and we act as the co-chair with the Department of Justice. And we also operate, on behalf of the National Archives, the FOIA Advisory Committee. This is a body that brings together agency FOIA personnel and requesters to collaboratively develop solutions to some of what we call FOIA's biggest challenges. The committee includes 10 agency FOIA professionals, and they represent the interests of agencies that process a very large volume of FOIA requests, including one agency that processes something like 170,000 requests per year. And then also those agencies that might receive a handful of requests during a year. I think one received literally a dozen requests per year. So while we do have several methods to gather information about policies and procedures, we still think that there's a huge information gap. So we really want to thank our executive for agency services, Jay Traynor, for bringing together the National Archives' various offices with oversight responsibilities and helping us realize that the Records Management Self-Assessment, or RMSA in your lingo, is really a perfect vehicle to help us fill that gap. First, given the dependence of FOIA on records management practices, there's a really logical reason to ask about FOIA in the RMSA. The primary benefit for us, though, is that working with Crow just really expands our ability to get a large variety of agencies on the record and to get a real depth of views. As you are likely aware, in this iteration of the RMSA, 258 agencies received a link to the online survey, and 100% of agencies responded. There is a very, very small subset of agencies that responded to the RMSA that are not subject to FOIA. But overall, we were able to gather insight into FOIA operations at 254 FOIA offices through the RMSA. A secondary benefit, as Lawrence alluded to, and as I've already kind of previewed, is that we're hoping that by including FOIA questions in the RMSA, we can help further strengthen the working relationships between FOIA and records management programs. Now I want to highlight a few of the FOIA results from the survey that we thought would be of interest to the audience. For those of you who can't read the slide, the first question we asked is about the relationship between agency records officers and FOIA officers. As you can hopefully see on the chart, about 10% of agencies reported that the agency's record officer and the FOIA officer are the same person. Hopefully, with some maybe minor exceptions, that means that they have a good working relationship, right? Oh. On the other side of the spectrum, though, we've got 24% of agencies who reported that the agency records officer and the FOIA officer know each other but don't work together. Turning back to the dependence of FOIA on records management, we think that this is a huge area of opportunity and that it's a really good reason to continue to encourage the FOIA officer and the records management officer to collaborate with each other. Moving on to the second question, I think this slide in particular is really good news for everybody in this room. We asked agencies to rate how easy it is for them to locate records that might be responsive to a FOIA request. On a sliding scale of 1 to 5, 87% of agencies reported that they have a relatively easy time finding records to respond to a FOIA request. So I just want to pause and let you all give yourself a huge pat on the back, because that's a really good job. Good job, FOIA records management programs. So the next question I'm going to discuss has to do with an amendment that to the Federal Records Act that was made by the FOIA Improvement Act of 2016. As you can hopefully see on the chart, 97% of agencies reported that they were familiar with the amendments to at least some extent. Importantly, we should note that the RMSA was issued not long after the FOIA Improvement Act was signed into law. So hopefully that deep blue proportion of no responses is actually a much smaller part of the pie at this point. But then getting on to the substance of the amendment, the final part is kind of part 2 of that other question. We asked, the specific amendment made by the FOIA Improvement Act was a requirement that agencies have a process in place so that they could determine records or categories of records that are good candidates for proactive disclosure. Because, you know, if you can release records before somebody sends a FOIA request for them, that's good for your FOIA program. It's also good for open government overall. So as you can see from this chart, about 4/5 of agencies reported that they have some sort of a process like this in place. If you are at one of the remaining 1/5 of agencies who don't have this kind of a process in place, or if you're looking for suggestions on how to improve the process that you do have in place, I want to draw your attention to some of the work that's going on at the FOIA Advisory Committee. As I referenced earlier, the FOIA Advisory Committee brings together requesters and agencies to collaboratively address FOIA's greatest challenges. One of the high-profile issues that they have decided to address is proactive disclosure, exactly this issue. The subcommittee has been doing some really interesting work in this area, and one of the recommendations that they are actually going to be talking about later this week is it's a guide that they put together that can help agencies think through how to put this kind of a process into place. So this discussion is going to be held in this room. So if you just really find that chair really comfortable and you want to come back on Thursday for another couple of hours worth of talking heads, please join us. We also live stream the sessions on the NARA YouTube channel. So if you're interested in either watching the session or learning more about the committee, just go to our website. It's at www.archives.gov/OGIS. So I'm not going to go into details on the rest of the FOIA results, but I did want to just mention the other topics that we asked about in the RMSA and give you a little bit of background on why we would ask these questions. One of our primary areas of interest in agency assessments is the FOIA program's use of technology. We think that a really good FOIA program will use the technology that it has as effectively as possible. Through the RMSA, we wanted to learn more about the technologies that agencies were using throughout the entire process. One of the interesting observations from the results was that nearly 1/3 of cabinet-level agencies reported that they use a custom-built FOIA tracking system. This confirms an observation that we made through our assessments that there's very little uniformity in technology, and we think that might have some really interesting implications for a move towards interoperability between systems in the future. We also noted that some agencies, of their own volition, this wasn't something we specifically asked them about, reported that they don't have access to technology that helps them deduplicate records. We have seen that deduplication technology is particularly helpful if a FOIA request involves email records. And as we continue to transition into an all electronically managed environment, we think it will be important to continue to monitor and evaluate the tools that agencies are using and spread information about what tools are effective. We also asked some questions about agency FOIA management practices, which is another one of our primary areas of investigation through our agency assessments. The questions are intended to expand our understanding of the kinds of management tools agencies are using to oversee their FOIA operations and identify potential areas for improvement. We were excited to see that a vast majority of agencies reported that they do have standard operating procedures for their FOIA operations and that they have some sort of performance metrics for their FOIA programs. We also were excited to see, we also asked one statutory compliance question regarding whether FOIA programs are alerting requesters to our dispute resolution services. 85% of respondents replied that they are alerting requesters to OGIS' services as required by the law. We see this reflected in an increase in our mediation caseload. Over the last year, we have quadrupled the number of requests for our services, and we will continue to monitor how our caseload changes as more agencies begin to meet the statutory compliance, to come into statutory compliance. Of course, if you're interested, and how could you not be, in learning more about these results, we're going to release an in-depth analysis of our results on our website. So if you are interested in either that report or any of the reports that we publish, the best way to keep up with that is to read our blog, The FOIA Ombudsman, or to follow us on Twitter. Because everybody loves following their favorite government agency on Twitter, right? That's what the cool kids are doing these days? Awesome. All right, so last topic of the day. What can you expect to see from the RMSA in 2018? So the questions are still under development, so I'm really not going to give you too much detail. I will say, though, that returning to the first result that we discussed, the FOIA, we do think that it's a really good way to encourage communication between FOIA programs and records management offices. So we do intend to continue asking questions in the RMSA. While we do want to encourage communication, one of our goals is also to include questions that can reasonably be answered by the records management officer if they can't find the right contact at the FOIA program. So we are aware of the kinds of issues, and we don't want to create an undue burden on you all. So really, that's it for me. I want to thank you all for your attention, and thank you again to Lawrence. If you have any questions, I am happy to take them if they're quick, or you can always find me after today's session.
Thanks, Amy. That was awesome. So moving right along, we have 2 more topics in the 25 or so minutes remaining to us. So I'm going to bring up the always well-dressed Arthur Hawkins to talk about the FRC program web pages refresh. And then in the last 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes that we have this morning, we will have Gary talk about developments in the records management training program. So, Arthur.
Thank you, Lawrence. No pressure. All right, let's see if we can get this thing going here. Hey, Jim, where's my slide? Page down. Okay, I can do that. Hey, look at that. Okay. How many people have seen this before? Okay, great. So a good bunch of you have already seen it. How many people saw the old website, the FRC website? Okay, how many people knew that we had an FRC website? Okay, all right, so we're tracking okay here. All right. Basically, about a year ago, my boss, Gordon Everett, the director of CRM, came to me and said, you know what, it's time to do a refresh, so you need to start working with the web folks. And I did that. And this is part of what we came up with, or this is what we came up with. This is the homepage for the new Federal Records Centers Program's website. And what we did was, our goal was to streamline it, to make it a little more user-friendly, to make it easier to navigate, less cluttered, so that everybody could pretty much find what they wanted easily. And if you'll notice, the little buttons here, where you can see the buttons, records, transfer and disposition, reference services, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These are the things that were the most important to our customers. We looked at the metrics, and we determined that ARCIS, the homepage ARCIS, and a few other things were the most clicked on portions of our website. So we put those up front and center, so that everybody could take a look at it and find what you needed to find right there. I'm going to put my glasses on because I can barely see this little screen in front of me. All right. So if you look at the records and transfer disposition button, you'll notice that you have transfer, disposition, permanent records move, schedule changes. You click on that, you go inside, and all of those items are in there for you. The same thing with reference services as well as for ARCIS, because that is the major thing that a lot of you come to us for, and that is to either go into ARCIS, get help with ARCIS, training with ARCIS. It's all in there. And if you look down further below, looking for a Federal Records Centers location, that's there. Just click on that, and up will pop a map with all of the different locations that we have across the country. Records Management Consulting Service, that is also very important, which is a growing entity within the Federal Records Centers program as well for customs records management. ARCIS Training, down below, the small little button, this is ARCIS Training. That is something that may be a little, I wouldn't call it redundant, but it just puts it front and center so you could get right to it. Okay? The FRC Toolkit, our account manager, Pam Northern, who is based in Atlanta, and Gordon Everett worked on this toolkit endlessly. They were able to put this thing together and make it all brand new. So please take a look at that, and that will tell you all that you need to know about the Federal Records Centers program. You can go in there, find whatever you need. Learn about the FRC services, more information for you. Need forms, we have them right there. If you take a look over to the left or the right-hand side, maybe my right, your left, the FRC video tour, order courts records, military records, find out about the FRC, and contact us. All of this information is right there for you. So if you haven't had a chance to go noodle around in here, please do so. We spent a lot of time on it, and because I said so. So really, just take a look at it. I think you'll find that it's a lot easier to navigate than the old site and a little less obtrusive. And that's pretty much all I have. Does anybody have any questions? I can see you.
I couldn't find the ARCIS portal.
It's coming. It's coming. No, thank you. Someone else brought that up to me. Andrea, where are you? Yeah, it's okay to say I told you so. It's coming, okay? He wanted to know where the ARCIS portal was, customer portal. And I said, it's coming. There you go. Any other questions? Okay, going in 3, 2, and 1. If I hear crickets, I'm done. Crickets, thank you very much.
And good morning, everybody. I see I'm the last thing between you and lunch. So I'll do my best to be expeditious, but I wanted to spend a lot of my time today really saying thank you to you, all of you, and give you a little sense of, frankly, some future requests that we're going to make of you to help as we modernize the training program. So we've been trying to give you regular updates on where are we at with this development of a new curriculum that will replace what most of you know as our knowledge area courses. So this is kind of where we sit today. We spent roughly the last 3 months with many of the folks in your agencies doing that analysis for the records liaison level of how do they do the tasks that we've identified. So that works pretty well tied up and done with, which puts us to where we're going. So the level 1 courses we've got pretty well underway for development. Anticipate finishing those hopefully in December. As long as we're all coming to work past December 7th, I think we'll stay on track with our schedule. Which is also why we planned our pilots of those out to February. I think we could have done them sooner, but with the uncertainty of budgeting and everything else, we said let's put a date on the calendar that we can ask you to start thinking about and that we're pretty confident we can stick to. So we will be looking for folks from your agencies to participate in those pilots down the road, and I'll get a little bit more detail of that in a minute, but keep that in your mind. If you've got custodians that you think are going to need some training between February and May, it might be the right thing to send them to us. We've started already working on the development of the second level. So along with the NARA strategic plan, we've done some kind of prioritization of that level too, right? So we went back through all of those tasks and asked ourselves, which are the most critical things to do digitization and electronic records management? So we've front-loaded those particular tasks, things around metadata, planning a digitization project, and are moving out smartly on getting those built. So our intent potentially is to even release those prior to the whole level being available. So again, we want to try to be timely with getting you training that ties into the strategic goals that NARA set and moving toward that 2022 deadline. And last on here, you'll see that we've got that third level yet to go. So we'll be coming back to you as the records officers over the next 3 to 6 months and looking to do interviews with each of you potentially on tasks that you're an expert for. Again, to identify how do you do these things, step by step, what are the actions, the decisions you make, so then we can build that into the training and roll that out down the road. So again, my thanks. What you see on the screen are the agencies that are participating in that level 2 analysis. In particular, I want to give a special thanks to the Department of Energy, Library of Congress, who really spent a lot of time with us. We appreciate everyone's help for this level, but some of the folks there really went out of the way. And many agencies, we had somebody do an interview for 1 or 2 tasks, which we greatly needed. I think those 2 agencies probably were in excess of 15 tasks for each agency, which is a lot of time. We greatly appreciate that. And we'll be looking to add to this list as we move into level 3, seeing who else would like to help us as we work on those tasks. So again, to get to this, what we're going to do is a little differently. So in the next week or two, both through RM Communications, and then I'll probably pull all the records officers' emails off our website. Expect to get an email from us asking you to fill out a form saying which of the tasks do you think you're an expert at and would be willing to be interviewed for. So since the community is a little smaller, I think we can rapidly identify folks that are a good target for interviews for each task. And then over the next 3 to 6 months, we'll reach back out to you and set that time up for that interview so that we can get the data. As you can start to see, if you think about our training staff, we've got 3 things going on at once. So it's a little bit of a balancing act for us. So if you hear some of us now and then you say, well, wait a second, I didn't mean contact me in April about this task analysis. I meant January. It's because we're trying to keep all this going within the confines of the staff that we have available. And again, the level 1 pilots, when those come up, we'll send an email out looking for volunteers. That training will be at no cost. So another little incentive for folks. And again, we're looking for folks that are custodians, right? Because we want this to fit the role that they fit in your organization and the tasks that they do. It's a little bit difficult for us sometimes to get great feedback when we have a bunch of people that have been doing records management for 20 or 30 years telling us about the tasks that they used to do. So again, we're looking for folks in the target audience. If you have a particular interest of wanting to know what's in it, what's coming, be part of it, feel free to send me a note about that separately, and we'll look at how can we engage you in it. But you're not the perfect audience for learning how effective is that training as we roll out that pilot. So another thing that we've been working on, last October we published NARA Bulletin 2017-01 that re-articulated in more detail what are the training requirements for federal employees in records management. And we've gotten a number of questions throughout the year of, are you going to develop something for us to use for this training? So we took a look at the work we had done with the Federal Records Officer Network for that e-learning piece a couple of years ago. And we kind of back-engineered this and said, what are the gaps between that product and what's in the bulletin? And so we've designed an outline for a face-to-face lesson. So a PowerPoint deck with a learner's guide and an instructor's guide and placeholders, because a lot of what's in those requirements is agency-specific, right? So when we talk about you need to talk to people about record scheduling and filing, it's not just that there's a record schedule. It's how do I actually file records in my particular agency and office so that I know where things are supposed to be done and how they're handled unique to your schedule. So we've built those placeholders in. I've got this about done. We did our final editing last week. I've got to do some 508 work on it. But if you have a need immediately for this, again, shoot me an email. I'll be happy to share it with you. If not, look for it both on our learning management website and potentially archives.gov within the next probably 30 to 60 days. But again, if you need it sooner, happy to give you the products right away. We just want to do our final review and make sure we've got everything tidied up on it. But they're ready to go. I did this with an agency in August as a trial run. Took about 90 minutes total, so not too long. That includes activities that are there for people to interact with one another and everything. So, and frankly, we got a lot of good feedback. It was an organization where you can think that the audience might be difficult, lawyers and judges who were engaged in the training the whole time, and even bothered to send follow-up notes to their senior agency official for records management, thanking them and the quality of the training. So I think we've got a good product. Certainly you'll need to tailor it based on the audience you're going to use it with and the purpose, but it's a good structure. If you don't have anything yet, this can certainly help you move down that road. And last, just a couple minutes on what we're doing in fiscal year 18. So again, as we move more online, we want to emphasize the things that are already available. Sustainable formats. We've had a lot of success with this course. The number one question, though, is, well, when do I have to meet people? When do we get together? And the answer is never, right? So that course is 100% asynchronous. There are no course meetings where everyone comes together. We've got an optional webinar that we've been adding up front in case people want to check in and get some help navigating the system, but it's completely optional. Everything else is self-paced. Yes, there are deadlines. Each week you've got things that have to be done by the end of the week, but you're never going to actually have a time and a place where you have to be to take this training. So again, we'll reiterate that with you. The opposite is the case for basic records operations and the vital business information courses. Those are a 90-minute webinar scheduled once a week. 4 webinars make up the course, so you do 1 a week for a month. Those 2 courses we have only scheduled online for fiscal year 18. So we used to offer them face-to-face, only online. If you have a need in your agency and you say, I'd like you to come do this at my agency location face-to-face, we can certainly still do that for you. But these particular courses have been online for a while. It just made sense as we worked through this transition to stop doing them face-to-face unless you tell us you need them. And we'll certainly do that for you at that point. And here's just kind of an example of what that course room looks like for the basic records operations and vital business information. So again, it's an online webinar, real time. Primarily folks are interacting through the chat, but we've got polls, whiteboards, other things we do to keep people engaged with learning. And I've had, again, a good success with students in these classes. Last, we are continuing the KA series in our classroom courses, electronic records management, and KAs primarily. Always available here in Washington, but we've not scheduled a lot around the country this year. So you can see generally where those locations are. Again, what we found is more effective is for you to tell us. So if you've got a body of people that needs training in a particular location, let us know. We'll schedule it with you, bring the trainers to you, rather than trying to take a guess on where are people going to convene around the country, right? In fact, October, this month we filled up with, I think, 4 agency requests towards the back of this month where if you come to me in the 3rd week of October, I don't have a single trainer that's not available some days. So I think that proves to be more effective for you and for your agencies in getting training to the right people. Again, contact as soon as you can. We've got requests into January and February already. So we do as much as we can, but we always run into the problem of, do we have people available to do the training when you want it? The sooner we know, more likely we can do it on your schedule. The shorter time frame and lead time you give us, the harder it is to see if we can actually do it on when you think you want it and you need it. So more lead time is better for you and for us. And then with that, we talked a little bit last year about this pilot we've done with agency assistants, where we partnered up with our agency assistance team and had one of their members available either at the end of the training or shortly thereafter to kind of do some coaching after the training and work directly with some of your folks in your agency on. We will continue to do that for fiscal year 18, but I got to tell you that we have very, very limited resources at this point. So if you're even thinking about this, please ask soon and sooner rather than later. It's just going to be a tough, I think, resource year for us. We want to do everything we can to support you, but we know there are some pretty significant constraints on both the people available and some of our travel funding this year to be able to continue to do this. So if you've got this in your head, please, sooner is better than later. Because if you ask next July, I'm not sure that we'll be able to say yes. You ask now, we're in a pretty good position to predict our resources through this part of the year and make good choices for you. So, and then some contact information, just again, we've also done a little brochure recently on the training program. If you need to spread information or have questions, you can download it online. And with that, let me just pause, and we probably have about 3 or 4 minutes if you have any questions before I turn it back over to Lawrence.
So Gary, we have a question from online. Wayne Best from DOD asks, they can't work with Google Documents. Do you have any plans for people like that? I don't know which part of your presentation it pertains to, but he says they can't work with Google Docs, and in the past, you sent things to them in other forms or something like that.
So in terms of the only thing I can think of is a sample lesson. We will post that both on our LMS website and on archives.gov. Those are all in standard formats. I mean, it's PowerPoint and Word documents. So if there's a specific need, if you would email me, that would be great. Then I can make sure I understand what we haven't been able to get to you. But generally, that's what we're going to be doing, is posting things through the LMS and through archives.gov. Other questions? I know there wouldn't be any. It's lunchtime. So Lawrence, let me turn it back over to you to close.
I'll have to say I'm a little surprised. Usually we have a ton of questions for training. But I think maybe Gary has it right. It's almost lunchtime. So I want to thank you all for hanging in there. We covered a lot of material, a lot of content today. 2 hours is a long meeting, so I appreciate you staying with us. Wanted to give you a heads up on the next Bridge meeting, which will be December 12th. And one last reminder for those of you who work with appraisers in appraisal teams 2, 3, and 4, we will be meeting at 1 o'clock upstairs in the lecture rooms, and it is Adams and Washington today. So thank you. I appreciate you all coming out on a Monday, and I hope you have a great day and a great rest of the week.